Next Gen Stats has introduced a revolutionary new metric called expected rushing yards, which identifies the number of rushing yards a rusher is expected to gain on a play by evaluating the location, speed, acceleration, and direction of every player on the field, both offensive and defensive, at the time of handoff. Here are the top 10 running backs according to the metric from last season. Starting this list off is our guy at number 10, Dalvin Cook.
That's what he can do. There he goes!
The Vikings runner took advantage of a scheme that fit his style and an offensive line that executed well to barrel through 1,100 yards rushing despite only appearing in 14 games. His explosiveness might be his best asset, and it shows in the advanced metrics. Cook registered 73 runs, yes, 7-3, of 15 miles per hour or more in 2019. The next closest in that category, who is also on this list, recorded 50 such runs. The man can move.
And now you know why the Minnesota Vikings are content to run the ball more than anyone in the league.
Leonard Fournette and the next man on this list were neck and neck in every category. He comes in at 9 because of a slight difference in our all-important metric of rushing yards over expectation per attempt. Fournette's mark of 0.5 is actually 1/100th less than the number 8 man on this list. But that's not the end-all be-all, in part because Fournette had another game's worth of carries more than his closest competitor.
And Fournette breaks out. Negative yardage on the night until right now.
Anyways, here's the skinny on Lenny. He overcame a subpar offensive line to rush for nearly 1,200 yards and post a 10-plus yard run rate of 11.7, bested only by 3 of the top 5 backs ahead of him on this list. He's good, and could be really good if his line were good too. No one had it tougher on this list than Carlos Hyde, who comes in at number 8. Hyde's offensive line was paving the way for an expectation of less than 4 yards per carry. 3.8 in fact, the lowest of anyone on this list. Yet he still broke past it for a mark of 0.5 rushing yards over expectation per attempt.
And nobody's gonna catch him.
Because of that, he was able to break 1,000 yards, even if he isn't quite an elite back like the others in this group.
And the ball off to Ingram. Mark Ingram, big run!
Mark Ingram earned the 7th place in this list, but boy was his team excellent in 2019. The wildest number in his stat line is the expected yards per carry, which came in at an eye-popping 4.6.
Bulldozing his way! Ingram in midfield and dragged down from behind!
An indicator of how good Baltimore's line was last season. That made the differential tough to increase, but at 0.5 rushing yards over expectation per attempt, Ingram was still exceeding the standard. Chris Carson isn't a household name, but he was an important one in Seattle in 2019, which lands him at number 6 on our list. He did it in a fashion similar to those ahead of him here, by breaking tackles. Carson broke 4 yards gained after close per attempt with a mark of 4.3, which when added to his 0.5 rushing yards over expectation per attempt, illustrates a running back exceeding the standard by flattening the competition.
Barkley to the 40, Barkley across midfield, there goes Barkley, 30, 25, 20, 10, 5, touchdown Giants!
Saquon wasn't quite say-gone in 2019, but the beauty of these new advanced metrics shines through at number 5. Barkley barely broke 1,000 yards, but his 127 rush yards over expectation shows us he was still achieving at a better than average rate. His totals are a bit deflated because of his 13-game season, but his 0.6 rush yards over expectation per attempt paint a picture of a running back still earning his keep. Our own Maurice Jones-Drew listed McCaffrey as his number 1 running back in the NFL recently, and while I agree with him somewhat, the numbers place him 4th. McCaffrey's 1,387 rushing yards were 211 more than he was expected to gain based on the performance of his blockers, making for a rate of 0.7 yards above expectation per carry. That's a high standard for someone who's carrying the ball nearly 300 times in a season. Josh Jacobs didn't finish first in Offensive Rookie of the Year, although he had a strong case, and he isn't first here either. But 3rd place in the entire NFL is pretty darn good for a rookie.
It's another good run by Jacobs, cutting outside, stiff arm at the 50 and still going.
Jacobs gave the Raiders the lead back they needed, exceeding a sub-4 expected yards per carry by 0.8 yards per attempt. The best rate among any other running backs in this group who ran behind a line providing less than 4 yards of expected gain per carry. If that's confusing, here's some context. Fournette, Carson, and Hyde all ran behind lines blocking at or slightly worse than that rate. None of them broke 0.8 rush yards over expectation per attempt. Jacobs has a bright future ahead of him. He wasn't first, but he most definitely isn't last in the hearts of the brown and orange diehards along Lake Erie. At number 2, it's Nick Chubb.
Chubb busting tackles all over the place.
The second-year back quietly continued to excel with the ball in his hand, averaging 0.9 rushing yards over expectation per attempt, and doing so by gaining nearly 5 yards per carry after a defender closed within a yard of him. Just because he's in arm's reach doesn't mean you can take down Nick Chubb. Just ask the Ravens defense.
On his way to the end zone.
And finally, the top running back from 2019. You guessed it, it's Derrick Henry.
Oh, he's done it again! Oh, Henry!
Who led the NFL in rushing yards with over 1,500 by bulldozing through would-be tacklers. Henry was expected to average 4 yards per rush, but averaged 5.1, finishing as the only back with a rushing yards over expectation of 1.1 per rush. That means he was the best in the NFL, which shouldn't surprise anyone.